you very much. Let me get this up. I will tell you I am driving a new presentation tool tonight. So I may look over my shoulder every now and then and just make sure things are working okay, so I'll ask for forgiveness up front. First thing I want to talk about is this will be, I think, a little different, especially if you are an engineer or you are a scientist, because I'm not going sequentially. We're not going to talk about processes. We're not going to talk about statistics and data. I will have a lot of data, and I will be able to share a lot of data with anyone that would like data on global trends and who's investing in R&D where around the world. But this presentation is about more the market and customers and trends and thinking about what kinds of innovations we need and really turning everything upside down. That's what we need to do. We need to turn everything upside down. So I will ask again if you'll forgive me if I need to look over my shoulder, because I just want to make sure it's moving with me. So a little bit, and we talked about my background, and really everywhere I go, I have to forget what I know. And it's really a humbling experience, and I actually enjoy doing that, so I don't know anything. That's the beauty of, I think, who I am. And what I bring to the table is I try to bring experiences from my past, but I really have to move forward as though I don't know anything. So that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about. I have a history of disruption, and my husband would agree with that. Probably a few other people might disagree with that, but very early in my career, I was in, when they introduced, I hate to even say it, 2D animation, satellite communications and meetings over satellites, the paperless office. You know, you guys are all too young to even think about the paperless office, but we were talking about digital imaging years and years ago. Video compression, which Cisco very eloquently has renamed telepresence. We called it video conferencing. One of the most successful rides of my career, from $20 million company to a $500 million company in less than 4 years. It was phenomenal. And we'll talk about why they created that success. And one of the well-known venture capitalists in PictureTel was Vinod Kosha, who is out on the West Coast. Many of you may know, Kalina Perkins. And we'll talk about the difference between that venture and other ventures of today. Linux, open source, Michael Tiemann, the open source, one of the first open source companies in the world, sitting here, who you will get a chance, I think, to see in the future. And then Roman Technologies, which is my most recent thing, part of PlazaBridge. One of the things that we do is we see a lot of different startups and companies. And we don't only work with startups, but we do try to give a lot of time to startup and new ventures and actually give them feedback, as much feedback as we can, to help them think about the business issues that they might face. Raman Technologies, however, this is a company in the Triangle doing some very creative things. And then the World Trade Association allows me to have a global perspective on what's the rest of the world doing. And then PlazaBridge, again, we see a lot of different startups. So we're going to go for a little ride. One of the first things that we have to get into ourselves is to know who we are. And when we want to innovate, if we don't know who we are and how much of a stomach we have to carry this innovation through, and I really am serious about that because it's a long ride. If you're thinking about innovation and you want to be an innovator and you want to create new technology, and we can look at Google and we can look at Facebook, but those are few, and they did have those early startup days. You have to be able to stomach the risks and the things that come with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And patience, we want to wait that out. Personal commitment, these are really important things. Color in my life, we're going to talk about trends. People today want color. They want to be passion. They want something with meaning. So the clouds that are reshaping America, the values, the value propositions, we want to be passionate about something. And I'll tell you a real quick story. I'll interact with a few stories here and there. I had written my first endeavor trying to write a screenplay. I do love to write, but I have not been trained to write a screenplay. But I did start to write a treatment. The treatment was called Junkyard City. I wrote that treatment about 3 years ago, and it was about a young boy who is lost, and then a homeless man finds him, and he takes him in, he takes care of him because he can't find his way back, and this man is endearing to him, and this young boy is endearing to the man. Eventually, he wants to pay him back because they live in a paper box. And he starts to build a home at a very young age out of garbage. So the idea was, what can we do with all this garbage? Tin cans. Shortly after that, I was driving to Holden Beach, North Carolina. and I met a woman named Mary Paulson. We almost missed this. Has anybody ever seen this? It's the most phenomenal thing I have ever seen in my life. We almost missed it. My husband was driving, and we saw this sign that was a very colorful sign. It said, junkyard and art. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And there was just a ton of junk in the front. So we screeched to a halt. We were 10 minutes away from the beach. We jump in, and there's this mecca, unbelievable mecca of art, homes. She had built a house out of bottles. Every single part of this junkyard was some kind of art made from something of waste. It was phenomenal. So let me take that back for just a second. Mary Paulson did not have a blueprint. Mary Paulson did not use anything other than sketching out on paper her ideas. And people had stopped over, I guess, the last 10 or 15 years, bringing her things. This is a 30-year endeavor. And my husband and I, talking to her, said, how in the world did you decide to do this? She's lived in this home, in this space forever. And we quickly, in about 15 minutes, got the story of her father passed away young, her mother passed away young. She was left with caring for the kids in the house. Very hard to find food and money to feed her siblings. She was struck one night, and God spoke to her. This was her answer, and said, you should create art out of junk. You need to create art out of junk. The money will come if you create art out of junk. And she started one bottle at a time. It's a simple story. This woman now raises money all over the world. People that know her, and she has a website, she has a blog, people that have ridden by and just happened in have come in and helped her build. Technically, you are the enablers, have helped her connect with the world of people where she can raise money by selling pieces of art and give them to children that have no home. So that's what I mean by clouds of value, reshaping. A woman with no means, in her mind, finds a way to create means. We have means, what can we create? I don't know how many people have seen this video, and I hope it comes up. And if it doesn't, we'll just go on, and I'll talk to them. So there are two videos that I wanted to share with you, and I guess maybe they're not going to come up directly. But the videos are Eric Whitaker's virtual chorus. Have you ever seen Eric Whitaker's virtual chorus? I would invite you to go to YouTube, and I really am sorry it's not coming up here, but YouTube has this incredible video of a virtual chorus, which is a worldwide chorus. They are panel screens. It all looks like a very virtual reality world where there are real people on every panel, and there must be 1,000 of these panels. It looks like an orchestra when you first see it, and then when you see the conductor, you realize he's not there. It's all virtually done, using video, using technology, using Skype. And they plan years in advance these pieces. Everyone practices. Individually, they record every single person's piece. And then they record it, and they produce this incredible work of art. So I would invite you to do that. That is an inclusive art form where people can get engaged, again, from all over the world, using technology that you have enabled them with and creating experiences where we can all get involved. So let's talk about some trends and why these things are happening and why it's important. The first thing is, we all know, you probably hear the term co-creating. So going forward, we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to co-create. This openness, the open environment, Red Hat was one of the brilliant success stories of open source and collaboration. The tools that are out there today to co-create and to create tribes, basically we're getting into little clusters of interest, and we're creating together things that can change the world. And so we want to invite more of that. That is a trend. Those things are happening today. Better me at any age and the we generation versus the me generation. And better me is we want to learn. We want to continue learning. We want to enable individual learning, not just classroom learning. And again, the technology enables us to do that. A nation that empowers, not a powerful nation. That is where we should be headed. It's a trend. That's what the underground, the underbelly of America wants. Can we get there? Oops, sorry about that. Let me go back. Empathetic encounters, inspirational changes. Anybody watching the miners come out, you just can't help but be engrossed in what's going on there and feel every moment of that. Self-learning clusters, child-driven education. We're going to talk a little bit about immersive experience economy. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And yes, transparency. You know, we hear it. What does it mean? But it is definitely, and if you watch the miners, everything was open. There was very little that you weren't seeing actually going on, and we were riveted by it. And the emotionally driven consumers, we are frustrated, we are angry, yet we want to be delighted and we want to learn. And there's so much about the political environment and war versus and disaster and things that we're hearing. We want to be delighted. We want less information, but more information. We want it to come at us in a nice package, not so much all at one time. And we need to earn the trust of our corporate buyers. There's a lot of mistrust because we've been misled. So all of these things are trends, and that if you're going out into the business world, if you're going out into the community, if you want to sell or you want to engage people, we need to think about these things. Then we have to come back and think about what if. You have a blue fortune cookie in front of you. The what if that somebody asked, what if fortune cookies weren't just plain? And there are websites all over the place that sell all kinds, chocolate. So the idea here is to think about the what ifs. What if you had multiple kinds of fortune cookies? The fortune cookie business exploded when they changed the fortune cookies. There is a real custom fortune in there. I will warn you, the good side of creating something, they didn't necessarily think about the negative impact. My mouth was blue for 3 days after I ate this cookie. So I chose not. You might not want to eat it here. You might hand them out at Halloween, but they are very good. They're blueberry. But we want to ask the what if question more frequently. So we're going to talk about the opportunities for innovation. Transportation, things that are changing, and again, I apologize because some of these images didn't come out like we wanted them to. But the world of transportation is changing. These things are actually happening. I got a proposal from a young group out of California that actually had created a helium balloon car, and it was pretty incredible. We're going to talk about money and what it takes to get something like this out there, but the kinds of things that people are innovating are actually pretty phenomenal. I think there is a lot of innovating going on, but it might be individual, it might be in clusters in the university, it might be in the garage at home. Other opportunities for innovation, certainly fuel, we've heard it over, water, energy, we've got a couple, recycling, nuclear waste. Anybody understand what the nuclear waste industry, what these big areas of nuclear waste all over the country are? If you have not, it was a great segment on Sunday morning about a month ago. Very scary to look at, actually. How much nuclear waste in these big containers. Is there anything we can do with that? As a science and technologist, these are the things we want to look at. From a negative standpoint, is there anything positive that could come out of that? Because it will take years for it to be able to dissipate or whatever it's going to do. Very, very big problem. Educational reinvention, and we're going to spend a little time on a couple of these and show some examples, but this one I'm pretty excited to share a story about. This gentleman, Sugata Mitra, and I want to read this because I want to do the guy justice. I mean, he's done, has anybody seen this story? It's pretty phenomenal. This gentleman in 1999 and his colleagues dug a hole in the wall bordering an urban slum in New Delhi, installed an internet-connected PC, and left it there with a hidden camera filming the area. What they saw was kids from the slum playing around with the computer, and in the process of learning how to use it and go online, they began to teach each other. That stemmed into one small project that stemmed into, well, let's put a couple of these around. Well, let's put some real lessons on. Well, let's take it into virtual classrooms with no teacher, and let's get what he calls the grandmother to talk to them over Skype. And what they found over a 10-year period, and now it is a real instrument building virtual classrooms where kids just come as they will. They're self-learning systems, and it's working. And the retention rate and the scores are higher. They're finding that actually is improving versus the traditional way of learning. So it's worth watching this video. It's very, very fascinating. So, and we talk about humanitarian aid. There's lots of things that are really, the country struggles with, the world struggles with, that we need to think about. And then simplification technology. Instead of IT, we should be thinking about simplifying. Apple has its own economy. We've all been in a downturn, and they grew, what, 24% again? It's unbelievable. There's no lack of an economy or challenge there. Apple is delighting. They are following these trends. It was an investment 15 years ago. I remember riding my car, actually, moving here. I was here in North Carolina for a year, and hearing that Steve Jobs and Apple had signed a contract with the first record label, and that they were going to distribute music at 99 cents. And I remember, I thought it was brilliant. I thought, he's got it figured out. It's going to take a while, but he's got it figured out. If he can outlast it, he's got it figured out. And everyone, the doubters come out, and we're going to talk about this. No, it's not. It'll never work. No. But it's working, and it's working now. Wall Street didn't think that they could stand it. So a lot of pressure on him to forego the patience. Safety needs, and that's personal safety, that's computer safety, safety in every regard, and food sources. Food prices to rise by 40% over the next decade. So food sources are really important. Now these are things you probably, I'm not telling you probably anything new, I just hope to give you a different perspective. So the diverse think is really important. That's how innovation actually gets off the ground, that we have a diversity of people. And we call it crowd-invented acceleration. It's not my term, it's terms that have actually been used out in the world. We need our cheerleaders. Everybody know what the cheerleader is? That's your guys or your people that are around your circle. They want to be a part of it. They're there when everybody tells you this won't work. They're saying, you know what, I think it probably has real legs. You've got to have the cheerleading squad. You need more cheerleaders than you need your skeptics. You need openness. We need more talk. We need ways to connect. We need to bring these ideas forward. We need desire. If we don't have desire and passion, forget it. It's not worth doing because it takes a long time. We need our super spreaders, and that's nothing like the web and Facebook and Twitter and all of these tools that allow us to spread more than it ever have before. And we certainly need our skeptics. You got to have the other side saying, have you thought about, well, I don't know, because that's what you're going to face when you get out into the real world. We get innovation. We're good at getting it to the door. But geez, when we open the door, there's a world out there that's got to buy it or use it, or you've got to know that world. And there's a lot of skeptics out there. Early adopters may buy it just to see, but to get it over that chasm, they aren't going to buy it just to see. So we need these skeptics because they're the ones that tell us, what do we need to tell the other world? And the mavericks, certainly the guys that love to bulldoze, but safely, cautiously, we need those that will take it out and help us get it out forward. And then the trend spotters. Those help us stay intact, what's going on in other worlds, what's going on with competitively, you know, what else should we be doing? What should we be doing? Should it be blue or should it be red? So this is kind of how I think. Am I making you dizzy? And then this is a canvas. This is just really sort of my brainstorming chart, a canvas of, this is how I think. My mother is sick. My mother was ill not too long ago. She's doing fine. But, you know, it's a challenge. I have 5 brothers. I've got a lot of family that's dispersed all over. And we needed a way to effectively communicate with my family. And I start thinking about the future. I think, well, I can't be the only one because we're going to talk about another trend in a minute, but I can't be the only one having this problem. You know, my family members can't be struggling. So what brilliant people do I know that might be also having this issue that might help think about solutions that we can stay involved with my mom and be there? And I think, well, what about Dr. Skype? There's got to be somebody in the technology world thinking about a Dr. Skype. So I get on the web and I do a search, and then I come up with this website that was monitoring the voice of the patient over the internet. This is an innovation site that invites you to submit how you might answer this question and pay you for those ideas. It's up to you to choose whether you want to give away the idea. But there's certainly now becoming mechanisms for us to tackle these problems in a different way. Anybody familiar with this site? It's packed with stuff, opportunities to offer innovative ideas, and some small funding to get it started. Not all of them want to take your idea. Some of them want to fund your idea. So this is the master plan. I think a lot of you have seen this. It's the out of Innovation Labs book. This is the master plan, typical of innovation. Again, this is a very nice process chart, and it's important. When we get to the sales piece, we're going to come back and talk to this, because again, this gets us to the door. But what do we do when the door opens and we need a whole market plan? Market development doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come rushing in and buy from us and call us. Rarely does that happen. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that should look like. So our challenge will, and that's what we're kind of talking about now. So the March 2010 Time magazine issue came out and said that the US was actually stagnant. There's been a lot of speculation that we've been a stagnant economy for the last 10 or 15 years. And R&D has been squeezed out of our corporate America. And so what's happened over the last 3 years has been dramatically different. In this year, I would say even in the beginning of this year, we are seeing, because there's less options for us, to do nothing but innovate. We have to innovate. So there is a spark of innovation. There is hope. There is a lot going on in the universities. We are all retooling because the economy has forced us to do that, which has been a good thing. So I think we're coming out of stagnant. But the challenge is we have to think about how we make these innovative ideas successful. Out of the 400 companies that we saw as doing reviews with them, just one-on-one most of the time, the key question we get a lot of times stuck on, and I'd say 70% of the time, there's no clear IP ownership, which will hose you every time. So this is a real challenge. If you start very early in the innovation and you document the IP very early, and then if it's licensed, there's very clean documentation, you will have much more success when this company at 15 years later, 5 years later, is sold for a big multiple. When it goes through due diligence, there's no question on IP. A lot of times, too, when there's a split in the company, where does the IP go? These issues are big. Funding, IP, got to be clean where the IP sits. So it's a challenge. We see it a lot. We see it out of all the universities. No funding. We'll talk a little bit about no funding here in a few minutes. Fearful of the future, which we might have these great ideas, but we're very afraid to take the steps forward. And that's a real fearful thing. So talking about when, how can I do it while I still keep an income coming in? Or as a young entrepreneur going out in the world where you don't have necessarily the family or the responsibilities, great time to take new ideas forward and to get people around you to help you. Because as you get older and as you get more bills and more responsibility, it becomes a little scary to step out and do something new without cushion potentially. Impatience, we talked about. No vested interest and purpose. And a lot of times in the big corporations, when I go into the big companies, there is less of there's concern that I might not be here next year, or that my job might get outsourced. Well, if I'm worried about that, do I have a real vested interest of bringing my best ideas forward? So we really need to think about this vested interest thing. If we're building a startup, I'm not talking money vested interest. I'm talking about my value system says I want to contribute and I want to see it through. What are we doing to engage people to see it through? Anorexic corporations. We walk in, and this could be very large companies all the way down to $30 million in startups. Whole departments are missing. We have cut down to the bone. Now, when we need to invest and when we need to grow, you don't go out and eat ice cream every day if you're anorexic. We have to build a healthy path back to these corporations growing and investing in people, hiring departments back in, rethinking what marketing might be and what sales might be, what are we innovating. All these things are really important for us to fuel our economy again. And partnerships. It doesn't mean you have to build it all inside. The friendlies, now what? Anybody heard this term? So in a startup world, and a lot of the startups that we go into, they're very proud that they got those first 5, 10, 18 customers. Well, they were all their friends. I went to everybody I knew, and they bought from me. And then all of a sudden, it all stops. Once we go beyond our friends, the real work kicks in. We have to have the diligent focus and strategic insights to take the product out to the rest of the world. And you have to build organizational support to do that. So when we get past those friendlies, we see a lot of people get stuck. It's not so easy from that point. Intense competitive pressures we talked a little bit about. And so now we go to change the way you change minds. And I'll talk a little bit about this book because it's one of my favorite all-time books. So I go to this quote, which I love. There are 3 kinds of people. Ones that learn by reading, a few that learn by observation, and the rest of them have to pee on the electric fence and find out for themselves. And it's very true. So when we're talking about new technologies and adoption, it's very challenging to get new ideas in. And this is a book called Influencer. Great lessons, and really insightful, and backed by a lot of research, down to even very remote parts of the world where the water is disgusting, and there are mechanisms in the water, microbiotic things in the water that will eat through the skin if people drink this. It's very painful, and a lot of health issues in villages around the world. And even though they tell people, and they sent troops in, they send people around the world to tell these people not to drink the water, that here is a filtering system that you can use, and it will help you not get sick. Nobody would use it. They went through 5 different scenarios and 3 years or so, if you read the story, of trying to convince people that they had all this technology and ways to clean this water and they didn't have to get sick. The only thing that worked is, in the 4th year or 5th year, they sent teams of people in that looked like them, and they went down to the water with them, and they started screening the water using a device as though they were just part of the community. They made themselves part of their tribe. And people watched and slowly, over time, absorbed their habits. And that is really what I'm talking about with adoption. That is how it really works. But a great book and lessons on technology, lessons on people. So, no funding. We'll go. It's hard to get funding. There is some money. I think the North Carolina, I don't know, anybody seen this? It's in Technology Review this month. There's, it actually outlays all the money available and from the Obama Innovation Fund and stimulus package. There's a huge amount of money going to the states, but there are for specific things. This is the amount of money going to the Fund of Storage Technology and Wind Power and Smart Grid. The interesting thing about the smart grid technology, and I'll give you a little bit of a global perspective here. The U.S. Commercial Trade Department has a department within it that for 15 years goes into remote parts of the world and finds out what the state governments, the countries, whatever they're buying, what kinds of infrastructure needs, do they need Boeing engines, what are they buying around the world? And they do everything they can to get that community, that company, that government to look at the United States suppliers, and sometimes they already know they want United States suppliers. They narrow it down, they qualify it, and then they bring it back to the states, and they have actually consultants that go in and scope it. And this is a bid situation, but there is opportunities for anybody doing this kind of technology to be an open system to participate in being a part of that funding and those RFPs, if you will. They are RFPs, but a very successful program that the U.S. Trade Group has put together that brings and matches successfully companies doing smart grid technology, airplane engines, whatever, building metal manufacturing facilities in Africa to manufacture tin cans. So a lot of these things are good, and we're doing more. We see the U.S. government doing more of those things. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm just saying there are things trying to spark trade and trying to spark U.S. expertise going in and helping around the world for money. But it's a good chart, good magazine. The VC models, I do believe, must change. The VCs have become very impatient. They've always been. I sold a company in Norway. It was a software company. It was brought over by the set of European VCs. They were struggling, trying to figure out what to do with this software company, but very, very impatient. And in the way that it's managed, and when you have a board, and when you take in money, it's no longer your company. We do want to be thoughtful in who we're bringing around us to fund our ideas. And we want to think about venture capitalists, and I think they certainly know that their models are also shifting and need to shift. They do need to be more patient. The 3-year exit doesn't help the country grow and create jobs, not necessarily. I'm not saying the exits are bad, but we do need to build. That didn't turn out right. So that's slide there was just saying that corporations have a role in supporting young companies. There's, right now there's a initiative. There's a lot of contracts out, and not a lot of signing of these contracts bringing money in. Deals. So the deal flow, a lot of proposals, big companies are holding on. I have this thought that if one big company signed one big contract, and they are, a lot of things are happening now, that actually sparks about 30 other contracts, if it's big enough. And that if we get one contract, we actually put 3 other businesses to work. And when we do that, that one contract starts to mean something. What can we do to create those kinds of chain reactions? Because that, too, is a funding model, but a different kind of funding model. But the other chart was saying that it just needs to have the venture side of the business sparking innovation and sparking investments as well. So the customer challenge, and we're just about coming to a close here. Earning the customers, everybody talks about selling to customers. You don't sell to customers, you earn them. It's a big difference. You do have to sell value, and you do have to go in and if you can't find why you should be there, if you can't help them understand why you should be there, then you're not doing a very good job. We're not doing a very good job. So I constantly work on the value proposition with customers, with my customers, my clients. But thinking about the marketing and re-engineering the marketing side of the business and really thinking thoughtfully about effective sales strategies, hiring the right talent. In a big company, a lot of times when we innovate new products, we use the same sales team to sell that product. It does not always translate that. If we don't have an intense understanding of the customer and how they buy and what they need, every product is a little bit different. So we need to think about those things. What does the customer segment require? How does it like to buy? And to support the people in that. The challenge in the big companies, and I'll just give you one quick idea and we'll start to wrap up on something here. That in a big company, I worked with a Fortune company. I'll tell you, there was a soft drink company, I won't tell you which one. But they felt like they were losing their innovation curve, and actually they had been told by their largest client their customer told them what they wanted them to do in the future. And this particular soft drink company was freaking because that had never happened in the history of this soft drink company. So they wanted me to come in and actually see what we could do to help spark innovation. And bring in a team of people, we actually put together a year-long series of ways to lead innovation from dealing with the bottom layers of the staff up to the executive layers and actually bringing them into the room together. And one of the together sessions, one of the ideas came out, and we're trying to spark new ideas for this particular company, things that might spark the customer segment that they really wanted to attract that was not a very big segment for them. I happen to have a daughter in that same age group. So as we're sitting around thinking about ideas, I brought up the thought, well, what if we, my daughter's kind of collecting things right now. What if we painted it and made it a pop art thing that was a collectible? And the young talent that had been brought in that was less than 2 or 3 years old thought it was great. The older talent started bringing up all the reasons why it would never work. When we actually started to uncover it, the reasons why it would never work was that no one is incented at this particular company to be innovative. They're incented to be operationally efficient. And to be innovative would break operationally efficient. They're Six Sigma certified. The process of being creative didn't necessarily fit in there. Plus, these guys were going to retire soon. So when we actually uncovered all these onion peels back, we started to really be able to lay it out for them and see, look, these are all the puzzle pieces of why you can't and why you can and what has to change to make it work. And in the end, it took them 4 or 5 years, but they actually came out with a pop art bottle. But there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in that. I go back to you have to have the cheerleaders, you have to have people that support it, it takes time. So that's just one quick story, and then I will come back to the opportunities of innovation and say the aging world. I don't know how many people know that the aging world is aging at a very rapid pace. And we don't talk about this a lot, but embracing innovation that supports an aging world. And the aging world does not mean that we're all in wheelchairs at 65. It means we want to learn, we want to be excited, we want to do things. This is a very active aging world. But yes, there's a lot of pressure that's going to be put on the world. The US is actually not the worst place. We have some of the most remote parts of the world that will be aging at a rapid pace that we really have to think about, and the pressures that other parts of the world put on the US as it's aging. That also means things in the workforce. It means the way that talent's hired, what age the average talent might be going into the workforce. So we need to think about that and innovate ways to engage, ways to improve health. All of these things are going to be really important. And then the last thing, we talked a little bit about globalization. Food, I'll end with this, food and the world needs food. Why do gardens have to be flat? This is actually a real building. You can't see it very well, but it's a vertical garden. I think this was in Singapore, but there's, I think Chile and Brazil have some. The Netherlands and some of the Scandinavian countries have actually built a lot of buildings. You're starting to see a little bit of this in New York now. So again, I start out with what if and why. You know, when we ask these questions, we come back to the trends. How are these questions, maybe can we influence with our trends? And then you guys are the enablers. You help us do these things. You bring technology to the table, and sometimes that is the product. And that's great. And then I say we read everything, just read everything. Thank you very much. That's my talk. I hope it sparks some ideas. I know. Oh, sure, absolutely. Are there questions?
Yeah, if you'll repeat the question so that he gets
sure.
it on the
Okay.
film.
Are there any questions? Did I really make you dizzy? Did I spark any ideas? Yes, Michael.
So the BRIC thesis says that by 2035, Brazil, Russia, India, and China are going to be the 4 leading economies of the world.
Yeah.
In 2000, the U.S. plus Europe was more than half of world GDP.
Yep.
When you added Japan, it was more than 2/3. Now, the youth of the world are in Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So this aging world presents a double divergence. Not only economically
you're right.
is BRIC going in one direction, they're all getting younger.
Yeah.
The aging Europe, Japan, and America, who's going to solve that gap?
Well, and I can't answer that question, but I can say that.
Do I repeat a little bit of that?
Yeah. So who's going to solve the gap between the youth that are in the BRIC countries that are actually evolving? And I'll tell you, to think about power and the world power. That's why I come back and say the U.S., should we be thinking world power or should we be thinking world empower? There have been also articles that, and you know, there's this debate that the U.S. actually has some of the most innovative minds in the world. Well, I can't answer that either. I don't know if that's true or not true. I know we have certainly the capability. We certainly have the school systems. We certainly have the ability to bring minds back into this country, which, again, we want to encourage people to move from other countries to here. So I don't have an answer to that what do we do about the aging population? What do we do about the gap where the young people are actually residing in these other countries? We saw what we did as a young country. We're a baby in the world. The U.S. is a baby. We are learning. We need to learn from them. But I also think open. If you look at this room, it's a very diverse room. How many of you want to stay here? How many of you live here? How many of you are resident here? We need to encourage and create programs that allow people to feel like, yeah, the U.S. is where dreams still can come true. And we can engage these other worlds. And I'll tell you, I've had the Polish embassy in Switzerland, about 15 to 16 different embassies. We're not head-to-head with China on what they're getting ready to invest. We're not going to have the money to do it. They are pouring money, and they will lose money. I had the Bio Bay area, and Suzhou is coming to me saying, we will lose money on the deal to invest in R&D, to come into our R&D park. You know, none of our VCs are thinking like that. None of our investments are thinking like that. So it presents a challenge that I can't answer. But with great minds, maybe we can pull cluster thoughts, thinking together to put teams of people behind that. Any other questions?
Teresa, can you talk a little bit about how companies can incentivize innovation?
Well, the first thing is that the leadership has to understand what it means and what it is, and incentivize it, that we create mechanisms for teams of people, and then you incent the group as things become successful, not just one person, because innovation is about clustering and ideas. So when we put incentives, and it doesn't have to be money, I keep saying it does not have to be money. People are incented by days off, by trips, by time with family. Money's good. I mean, those bonuses are good, but you can incent on, and a lot of people just want a pat on the back. They just want to know they were part of something. And I'll tell you the idea that are you chipping away at a rock and just chipping away, and these little things are pebbles because somebody told you to get that rock out of the way? Or are you chipping away because these pebbles are going to be made into a castle up on that hill? Can you see it? See that castle? I see this rock. It's going to be part of that castle, and these guys are investing in that. It's going to be beautiful. So what are we doing? I think if people see that there is a bigger picture and that we want them to be involved in that end result, and whatever that is, they have a stake in it, that they will be more encouraged to innovate. I do think the processes are so tight in a lot of companies that without being operationally inefficient, there's got to be a way to build in innovation into the operational efficiency. And we need to think about that. And again, I don't have an answer to that. I will say that at the soft drink company, they figured out a process. And I'll tell you, there are failures in that. Relaxing the failure and not talking about it as a failure, but an opportunity to learn. Getting rid of the fear that if I step out, then I'm not going to get shot down, and that's a big fear in companies today. Those are two big ones. And time, and having input from the top to say, yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, keep going, keep trying it, and to know when to stop. I did a spin out for a $200 million company in New York a couple years ago, and I knew how much money they wanted to put into it. I had sort of formed what would tell me that it wasn't going to work. When do I say, let's take this team and just say, no, you know what, this isn't going to work? And in about a year and a half, we put a program together, we launched it out. We didn't say it wasn't going to work, but we said, you know what, it was going to work better if we did it this way. And so we tuned. So if you can build those things into it, it feels less risky. Does that help?
Yeah.
No. Any other questions? Yes?
You spoke about other countries becoming leading economies. It sort of brought up the idea that thinking about how risk is treated in societies like this. We seem to be in a comfortable position. Don't mess with it. Just keep everything good, and we'll be all right. And it seems like the idea of risk gets sort of covered up. Like, oh no, we need to just go to school and get a good job, and don't worry about the rest. How do you try to influence the way people think about risk?
Well, I call it, there's safer risks, and then there are real negative risks. There's, like, if you see the cliff, and the cliff's like one more step, that's probably a pretty risky venture. But can you do enough homework, enough research to know, like, understanding the trends? Stephen Jobs didn't take necessarily a big risk. There were things that needed to happen in the music industry, and all the stars were lining up. He just happened to be the first guy that said, I'm going to go ahead and stick the stake in the ground and do something very different here. And now he had the funds to do it. When we have a company and we see these risks, and we're in a corporation, if we're in a bigger company environment, if you don't be the maverick in that environment, you be the person that goes out and builds your cheerleading squad that understands what you're trying to do, and you build your case. You take it a little slower, and it will work. And in the case, again, of this big company, we took some time and showed them how to set up the case, because your job there is to sell it inside. You got to sell to the management team. You want to engage them. They need to understand what the big picture might look like if you take this and move it forward. So it doesn't feel so risky. And I'll tell you, if you come back and say, and here are the risks, here are the barriers that might keep us from ever getting there, And here's the time that I think we call it quits if it doesn't happen. And I think it would take back of the napkin a little bit of money, this kind of money, to just go test it, rapid prototype it. Are there things that could be done to do it safely in a small way? We don't have to jump off the cliff first. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
It just seems like in many industries now, there's an opportunity to be more of a co-inventor with your clients. And so don't invent and say, did you want this after all, but to really engage in the whole process.
That's a very good point. To be a co-inventor with your clients or your customers or your partners. Now, go back to the co-creating. I say co-creating to compete versus compete to kill. When I'm co-creating to compete, I might even include my competitors in my co-creation mix. Because if we succeed, they succeed. Why aren't we thinking that way? If my partners and my customers will be more apt to step up if I'm a partner and not trying to sell them a box. Absolutely. I think, and a brilliant point to bring up. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys very much. It's a lot of fun to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you.